Well, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to have a great roundtable type discussion on deploying traditional media workflows to the cloud and explore, what that means from a strategic business and tactical operations point of view. So we've got actually four wonderful panelists, each of whom sort of represent a different leg on the stool. So we have Mike Owen, who's Principal Solutions Architect for AWS Visual Computing. And we have Stephen Labrie who's Senior Product Owner for the Flame family at Autodesk. Alex is our CTO, Streambox CTO and co-founder. And then last but certainly not least, we have Dave Young, who's Head of Engineering at Carbon FX. And so each one of these experts is going to bring a kind of unique perspective to the discussion. We encourage you, I'm going to be asking some questions and we'll kind of get a dialogue going, but I encourage everybody to post your own questions. I mean, this is a fabulous opportunity, to speak right to the people who really know what's going on. So without further ado, so again, Mike Owen, Principal Solutions Architect for AWS Visual Computing. So Mike, can you tell us a little bit about the AWS vision for media and entertainment at the outset? What sort of led you to dive into that pool, so to speak?
Sure. So from my perspective, I was actually part of the Thinkbox software acquisition by Amazon Web Services in March of 2017. Which brought in line content production, VFX experts, visual effects developers essentially into the media and entertainment arm and the content production arm of Amazon Web Services. And so media and entertainment has been growing as a business for many, many years at AWS, but it had a huge steroid injection in 2017, where essentially Thinkbox was acquired primarily for its software, its render farm, render management compute software, but also just for its experience and its deep pool of developers. Experience in the visual effects industry, and with that came along a few people like myself, who were pipeline R&D engineers from the visual effects industry, who wanted to continue to help customers, not just in the render farm management side of things, but across the entire portfolio of media and entertainment, and supporting more and more content production workloads to the cloud. And so we've got a very long-term strategy to continue to assist media and entertainment customers to bring applicable, that doesn't mean all, but applicable workloads to the cloud. And a really big hardball problem was, could we run an application, perhaps something that's never run in the cloud before, to the cloud? And that brought me in sort of late 2017, early 2018, to the cold streets of Montreal to visit our friends at Autodesk to see what could we do with the Flame application, because that seemed like something that might actually be ideal to take to the cloud.
So did you saw Flame as sort of if we can do this, we can do anything?
It's such a turnkey, high-end product. For many, many years has been used in so many different ways throughout the industry, but it's not something that's ever been run on the cloud. And so there were other conversations that were running in parallel at the same time. This is many years ago now, but it was part of the journey, which was, how can we help bring different workloads, perhaps from Autodesk and from other ISVs that operate, vendors that operate with their applications in media entertainment, can we help bring them to the cloud? And so we were looking at, like, what's a really hard problem? And Flame definitely presented itself as something that has such high specifications in terms of hardware requirements and everything else. It seemed like, well, if we can solve this, could we potentially solve lots of easier problems? And then that's really the genesis, the moment where it was, if we can solve this, what else can be solved? Hopefully other things will slot in downstream. From our perspective, we saw the potential benefits to bring what would traditionally be a turnkey, high-end hardware product with an application stack on top of it, and bring that to the cloud and essentially move from a CapEx to more of an OpEx model. And we saw that as being a real benefit for potentially for customers to that on-ramp and that ability to ease of access. It's something that became overnight, something that, you know, the cost of one of our EC2 instances, $1.20 an hour. It was like an incredible moment.
So that's actually an interesting point, the CapEx or the OpEx versus the CapEx kind of thing. Do you see that as one of the key value propositions?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's really interesting to see sort of as a North Star here, which essentially the Flame product has recently become in our eyes in terms of demonstrating where the capabilities of the cloud actually really lend themselves very, very well. Bring in a product which perhaps is really hard to kind of gather the hardware equipment and the software and put it all together and have someone to administer and install and set it all up. I mean, of course, Stefan's here, and I will totally agree with him that the product has grown and matured in such a way over the years, it does make it easier to install, but it's still a complicated product, but that's because it's very powerful. So being able to run that up essentially with just an image that's already available in the cloud in an automated, orchestrated infrastructure as code mechanism, I found that the users and the customers that have started to run with this now have found it very, very powerful to essentially spin up, do their work, and turn it off within seconds or minutes. I mean, more like minutes to hours, but just I want to demonstrate how quickly customers can then move. Obviously, the key with most things in the cloud is when you're not using it, turn it off. And that's really where the power comes in here.
Cool. So, Stefan, you want to weigh in on that, since you were involved all the way back to 2018, was it?
Absolutely. Many customers were looking for, modernizing their workflows, and were asking, well, you guys should be running on the cloud. But I mean, asking something like that for a product like Flame, we were not sure, because what makes Flame is, it's interactivity. So we work with hardware vendors and technology partners, so we can take all the extra bits of the workstation and the graphic card to make, a seamless experience. So to be able to run on the cloud means more than only running on the cloud. It has to behave like a Flame. You have to be able to use your Wacom tablet and do magic with your demanding customer in the back who is asking you, well, can you tweak this thing? I mean, the process, the creative flow goes super fast in the Flame suite. So the artist has to be able to see the result of his thoughts when working with the application. So that was one of the scary part, but also the motivation that we had to work with AWS and the customers to see, well, how can we make that happening on the cloud workflows, right?
So, one of the issues with being in the cloud is getting a return feed, right? So you don't have the platform right in front of you, and you can certainly see a proxy of what's going on, but how important is it to see like a super high quality reference version of it? And what are the issues with getting that from the cloud back down to the Flame artist?
So in the post-production workflow, right, very often people will go in the Flame suite, and that will be the first time they will see their high quality content. Well, they're going to be able to judge the resolution, the motion, the color, right? So everything we do in Flame, when we're done, it goes to Hair. Or any outlets or media outlet these days that you can find, like social media, cinema, or television. So it's very important for the customers to be able to judge all these things while they are creating the project. So not being able to see that will mean, well, we need to do review. We need to maybe create a QuickTime files, which can be reviewed in maybe a non-optimal condition. And then there's confusion. What am I looking at? How? So all the whole color management things, which at the end of the day, if we can skip all these by having an interactive workflow with a direct output of the Flame over the network, so the customer can look at the content we're creating, well, then we are bypassing or accelerating all the part of the workflow which could be difficult to achieve without this technology.
So we
We
just
were,
got
I'm sorry. So
sorry.
we were talking with many sites who were in fact doing the spots for the Super Bowl, right? So many of them in fact experimented the cloud workflows, and many of them had to deliver very before the broadcasting of the event. So you have no choice. I mean, you have to be able to theoretically see these things and get the return from your customers, so you can work till the last minute and then provide that to the broadcaster. So it's paramount to be able to have these kind of interactivity and workflows.
So we just got a question here that I think is germane at this point, and this is from anonymous attendee. How do you deal with local assets, NFS cache based on folders, et cetera, et cetera? So this whole issue of local storage, how important is that for Flame to start with? And then that's my question. And then, you know, how do you deal with local assets in the cloud?
So local assets have to be moved to the cloud. We're not into a hybrid workflow where you would be easily able to work with local asset and then move that. So it's not a rendering solution only. So everything is a shared location on the cloud, and then it could be used with all your creative application or background renderers. There are technologies with the different storage vendor, which ease, in fact, the movement of the file between the local and the cloud. So these can be used, but yes, you need to make the assets available for the application so you can work on them. So
Dave Young, have you thought through this issue? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, so I can tell you a little bit about how we manage some of that stuff at Carbon. We use high performance scale out NAS in the cloud that we attach as if it's a frame store on our Flames. The performance is quite capable of handling upwards of 30 Flames connected to an 8-node cluster. And we get great up to 2K playback. I've personally seen. I've not seen any frame rates or frame sizes higher than what you'd expect from a commercials producing facility, but in the cloud, we find that performance from the storage is actually not really an issue. As far as a drive that comes back from a shoot goes, as Stefan said, in general, we bring those drives in on premise, we plug them in, we conform off the drive, and we ship up to the cloud, up to our shared storage. Plates, whatever formats that they need for getting started on their work. And the central location is available to all of our artist workstations. So the entire VFX pipeline from start to finish between CG, 2D and animation, everybody can work off the same material as it came from the camera and generate assets to a central place that allows us to do our whole job from the cloud.
Cool. So the second part of this question was the cost implications. So Mike, you talked earlier about OpEx versus CapEx. And so how does that play out in terms of local storage in the cloud?
So you really have to, well, the easy answer is ingress is free, egress of data costs money. It's cheaper if you go over dedicated fiber compared to public internet. That's the easy answer. That's all the pricing is available on the AWS pricing website. Easiest thing to do is actually use our calculator, a simple calculator, which actually creates an entire estimate for you, and you can download it as a PDF. But the better answer, I think the more informative answer here, based on kind of reading between the lines of the question here from the attendee, is that it depends, and it depends on what you're actually using Flame for, which is why a big thing between myself and Stefan and the rest of the engineering team at Flame was storage agnostic, in the same way they're storage agnostic on-prem. And so they have lots of different NAS providing SAN and NAS and storage providers, which they all support. And those providers, a lot of them are actually present in a lot of the public clouds as well. The vast majority of them definitely on AWS. And some really sort of interesting ones, the newer Cumulos, the Weckers of this world and things like this, right? But there's not one specific need to use any of them. It really depends on your use case. You could actually just use the block storage, the elastic block storage known as EBS, and build out multiple block volumes and RAID them and provide some local storage like NFS directly or block directly to the individual flames, and in the flames can act as NFS server client relationships to the other flames, which is a very traditional kind of flame architecture. Doesn't have to be like that. You could have different workflows like Dave's alluded to with high performance requirements as well. But if you're doing HD workloads, you've got to think about the price point, which they all come at in the same way they come to you on-prem. If you want the absolute a la carte high-performance storage system, then you're going to be paying for it as well. And are you really delivering all of your commercials at 4K when the reality is today, you're not? So the answer is it depends. And it's really about having the flexibility and knowing you're not in a corner. And I can answer that confidently that we have lots of different options, both native and also we really lean on our partners to solve difficult problems.
So in a way, it's actually, you get the flexibility of choosing a solution that's scaled to your needs rather than, oh, we need to buy this incredible high performance thing to cover all possibilities.
Agnostic.
Yep.
Price point versus your needs. Yep.
Cool. So Stefan, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, in fact, we're just to complete, in fact, what like my guy said, you have so many options that it's very often, mind-boggling how many options you have, right? Which is good, but then it's good to work with great partners to be able to define how you want your studio in the cloud. What are the requirements as far as speed, the amount of instances, and all the technology that you need around Flame, because as we know, Flame is one part of the post-production workflow in the cloud. So we decided when we introduced Flame on the cloud last spring to closely work with system integrators, people who know, in fact, the whole AWS cloud workflows with M&E, so then they can help you choose the right bits of technology, the right region, the right networking topology you want to use with our products. So that eases and helps you to build these complex workflow with the right components to get the right flexibility and the right cost at the end.
Yeah. So again, this is a matter of having the flexibility to scale the platform to whatever you're doing and not continue to pay for it into the future when you're not using it.
Well, very often it could be on premise impossible to do these workflows. And I'm give you an example for the post houses who went for the cloud for the Super Bowl commercials. Well, they were able to deploy 45 flames. So if you are on premise and you have 10 flame and you need 10 more, well, you need to source the hardware. You need to find the place in the machine room. You need to find the artist. Well, by a click of a button with some orchestration, well, you can get these 25 more flames. So you're set up like this, right? So that's, to me, sometimes that is the big advantage of the cloud, being able to be flexible to answer your customer needs. And at the end, you cannot deliver the Super Bowl spot the day after. That doesn't work. The price you paid for the advertising fees is so high. So then that kind of workflows is, to me, the number one thing is I can be flexible. I can get artists all around the world to work in my production. So all in all, I mean, it's magic.
So this is a great argument to your local finance person, right? They're not going to be beating you over the head saying, Dave Young, why'd you buy all those expensive platforms? We're not using them again today. So Dave, I know you commented last time we spoke a little bit about how cool the whole concept of, being able to ramp up from 20 seats to 40 seats. I don't remember the numbers he used. Can you expand on it a little bit?
Yeah, just to expand on what Stefan was talking about, in a previous life, trying to source flames to get Super Bowl work out the door when everybody was on premise, just 6 years ago, was the kind of thing you have to put your calls in at the beginning of December to everyone who owns a flame that they rent out, and there's no guarantee you're going to get the hardware in, and that's got scheduling implications, as Stefan alluded to, and can be a real issue. But in this case, the original my original experimentation with the cloud was mostly for rollover purposes, so we could scale up when we needed and scale down. And now that the entire business is taking place in the cloud, it's a simple matter of, oh, we got a freelancer starting tomorrow, let's build them a flame. It's a click of a button that our production staff can do with the tools we've provided them, and the flame comes up. We don't even know whether or not they've used it, but we see it power on, and it powers itself off when they disconnect, and we don't hear any complaints about not having resources available. It's seamless scaling with the tools that we've wrapped around the incredible technology that's available to us from AWS.
So are you saying you like it?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, honestly, I think you know, when I first started hearing about Flame in the cloud, you know, Stefan's description of people's sort of you know, hesitance to putting faith into the product is from a customer perspective is totally founded. You know, I was so doubtful at first. I'm not going to lie, and I've seen personally driving and you know, helping people achieve, you know, creative work with these tools. I've seen how well it performs and how easy it is, knowing how easy it is to scale, because I know how all the nuts and bolts fit together, you know, at least in our environment. It's been a great experience.
So we have sort of a follow-on question here that, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but, you know, this all sounds interesting, but it makes calculating costs next to impossible, but that's not really true, is it? So Mike, could you like play back what you said earlier about calculating costs before you actually commit?
If it's a managed native, you know, AWS service all the way down to our block storage, to our EC2 instances running, to data coming in, data going out to a specific location. So, you know, inter-region or back to on-premise via the internet, all of these things are calculable. If anything, when you go to the cloud and you've never been to the cloud before, you do have a little bit of a moment, shall we say, when you realize, wow, there's a cost associated with that and this. And the hand on heart answer is, well, yes, and that cost does exist today on-prem. It's probably absorbed and wrapped in so many other costs and driven down a multi-year kind of payment plan. You don't realize the CFO actually is already paying for it. He started paying for it, he or she, many years ago. So there is a bit of a moment to realize that it's all in front of you, but at the same time, although that may sound perhaps scary, it isn't, because you've got true visibility. With the visibility, you then have control, because you can see exactly what things are going to cost, and you can project them and you can estimate them. I mentioned before calculator. It's literally the word calculator.aws. It takes you to an entire web page. You can start pricing absolutely everything up, and then to add on to that, any third-party marketplace or third-party vendors that you use their technology and whatever licensing that they require, which obviously is pass-through cost for us if it comes through our marketplace, or you go direct to the vendor to purchase your Autodesk subscription. As we're talking about Flame today, I just mentioned, you know, there's no licensing change. The Autodesk subscription and how you pay for Flame in the cloud is the same as it is on-prem.
And I think as far as calculating costs go, I think it's not necessarily more difficult to calculate costs. It's just different the way you calculate the costs. I think we're all very used to seeing how much it costs to buy a piece of hardware, depreciating it over your accounting team's depreciation period, and then, you know, figuring out what that costs me every month for this piece of hardware. But then there's the cooling bill for your data center, there's the electricity bill, et cetera, which in general don't get factored into the cost of that piece of hardware on premise. That I think, if anything, you get a little bit more transparency, as Mike was alluding to, as far as what everything's costing you in the cloud to run that flame for that day or for that hour or whatever it might be.
It sounds like a cop-out, but the answer that we always give is that my team generally engages with customers that are keen to try out these technologies, try out Flame, try out you know, Streambox in the cloud, you know, whatever the solution as essentially a proof of concept, a POC, and we provide a limited amount of credits that essentially covers all of their cost. But the key thing that we tell every single customer that we talk to, and we essentially allow them to test for free on AWS, is all of the billing systems and the pricing are still going to flow. We just minus that number at the end of the month. And so they can actually test for a couple of days, a week, whatever they want, and actually see what the real cost is for the particular architecture, the particular storage, et cetera, that they want to use. If that price point isn't good for them, then perhaps it's because they've chosen maybe the wrong architecture, which is where my team steps in to help, and and where the system integrators and the rest of the ecosystem that has always been there for Flame in this particular case today is there to support customers who perhaps don't have the IT support or need additional assistance to just test the waters. And it's not a key thing I should mention is Flame running in the cloud is not an all or nothing. This is not to say Flame's not on the on-prem anymore. Not at all. It could be. It could also be hybrid. It's just to augment, like Dave is saying, we can just burst Flames in the cloud. That sounds quite explosive, but that could just be one option for you. It could be freelancers who then want to use remote streaming protocols, to traditional Teradicci, HP anywhere, I should say now, PC over IP. There's DCV, which is the streaming protocol from AWS. That's just the interactive protocol, and that allows relatively high latency remote location artists to be able to log into where these machines are running. So then you've got the ability to access these Flame systems from quite some distance. All of that is available to essentially to play, and that's my recommendation would be customers, if they're interested, should not get too stuck in a mindset of like, oh, I think it's just going to be too much. Well, you don't know that unless you've tried.
So you brought up, you mentioned a word that I want to touch on, latency. And Alex, so I'm surprised we haven't had a question on that yet. It's definitely an issue that when you're, particularly when you're dealing with high resolution video and, like really massive files and complex streams. Alex, you want to talk a little bit about latency and how Streambox has helped mitigate that issue?
Yeah, sure. When we started development initially, we already had pretty good quality for 412-bit, 4K, and we have good latency. The problem was to kind of merge it together to deliver reference quality at that 444-12-bit quality. And that's what was our initial goal, to kind of to provide reference monitoring. And since then, last 6 months, we focused to make it more simple for end user. Kind of how do you establish connection, how you deal with firewalls, how easy to set up and use that reference monitoring. And at this HPA, just last week, we announced a new P2P workflow where you could send reference stream at the same 444 quality with even less latency than before, because it's point-to-point connection to homes. So your artist could work at home. And it also will allow you to save cost as well, because there is no intermediate cloud. So it's right from AWS directly to your artist.
So, anybody that wants to jump on this, so this must have been a concern for you, Stefan, in the beginning. I've spent a lot of time with creative people. I know how they can be, particularly when you change something they already know. So,
yeah, latency is key. Like I said earlier, the Flame experience is about that. It's I do something, I see it, and then my customer can judge the result of my work and then say, this is what I want. When you do a subtle color adjustment, well, you cannot. If you have a big latency, you're going to be off, and that's bad. And to go back to the origin of this project was, well, to have a successful Flame on the cloud, it has to be as good or even better when you are on premise, right? And we were pleased because when we launched at NAB, we were at the AWS booth and we were able to let Flame artists try it. Say, well, I can show you Flame on the cloud, but at the end, you're going to use it. So take the Wacom tablet and draw something and navigate in the application. And then they were kind of confused. They were looking for, where's the big computer? I'll say the big computer is in the cloud. What you're looking at is Flame on the cloud. And then they kind of realize, okay, there's the marketing message, and then there's the reality, and well, they align. Yeah, I mean, a flame is a flame. It has to be fast on premise, but also has to be fast on the cloud. So latency is, but yeah, again, that's all about how you're connected to a data center, right? So your internet connection, the data center, proximity, so the zone you are in the world. So you, like Mike said earlier, I think it's good to validate these workflows to make sure. So you start small, start with one flame, try it to see, how it works in your region, and see, what you get, and work with a professional who can advise you on which technology you need to use.
And to add a little bit for the numbers, with Streambox solution, you could go as low as 70 milliseconds. And in our experience, as long as you're below 100 milliseconds, you really could, do very fine adjustment as you are at home. So 70 milliseconds, I'd say it's pretty good.
So, so we have a question here. Streambox reduces the latency in terms of playback and review, but not in terms of the interaction with the Wacom, right? So, well, go ahead, whoever wants to take that. So that's two ends of the stream, right?
Yeah, you need to separate the conversation between the interactive stream, which is the keyboard, the HID, the keyboard, mouse, and the Wacom tablet input. Okay, and let's call it the equivalent of the SDI signal out. And where we were at with Flame launching was it sort of NAB last year, we were demonstrating the built-in NDI kind of workflow just to get the SDI signal out, and it's dropping frames, and it has a few nuances, and obviously it's CPU 8-bit limited, which it may be perfectly fine. I've never said, and I never will say this, there's a NDI is no good. That's not correct. It depends if it's applicable for what you want, and it's just a quick over the shoulder. Absolutely, NDI is a rapidly evolved over the last few years ecosystem. But when the moment we talk about 10-bit, 12-bit, 4K, being able to see beautiful HDR, RE camera, red camera footage, playback for the highest fidelity workloads, NDI is not going to be there for you. You need a different solution. And latency is indeed very much a part of that equation. But when it comes to the interactive stream, then you've got the traditional Teradicci, PC over IP. You've got a nice DCV as our streaming protocol. The HP obviously used to have that RGS that used to be heavily used, but that's obviously combined now with their purchase of Teradicci to make the HP Anywhere, if you didn't know. But there's lots of other interactive protocols out there, and they have varying degrees of performance. Keyboard, mouse, relatively easy to achieve, but then the Wacom tablet and the brush strokes and everything start to become really tricky. Same thing with the tangent control panel surfaces and things like that, where actually they're really latency sensitive. Same thing, the Blackmagic control panels and stuff like that. There's different techniques that have been used over the years to solve them, whether it's like a server client agent software, or just improvements in the technology in the actual interactive streaming protocols. You can see that in the performance of the Wacom tablet if you test Teradicci and test DCV, and some of the other ones are lagging a little bit behind. But I'd recommend testing a few of the different interactive protocols and see what works best for you. Again, I think I'll speak on behalf of everyone here when I say we're agnostic in terms of what interactive protocol you're using. And on that streaming video SDI protocol, the answer could be it depends. For low fidelity, or do you need like medium to high fidelity signal quality? I would say that for the majority of Flame use cases, you need that medium to higher use case fidelity high solution.
And if I could add a little bit, can you show slide number 4, please, for people who kind of not familiar with overall solution? So actually, there are two parts of two video feeds coming from the Flame instance. One is your remote desktop, like Teradicci or Nice DCV. So you have your local monitor where you kind of control stuff. And there is second feed from Streambox that is actually reference quality SDI stream, basically. So those two are working together as you would work at your Flame, like in Edit Bay, where you have your computer monitor to control UI and your reference monitor. So we're exactly mimicking that workflow. And in most cases, Streambox latency could be as good, or in some cases, even better than teradigital latency, if it helps.
Are we done with that diagram?
Yes.
So this is sort of paraphrasing a few of the questions you're up. So how practical, so somebody commented, Mike, that it's great that you guys offer, sort of a trial run, is this really for me kind of thing. But how practical, how approachable is this for a small facility, or particularly a freelancer? Do I need, an IT team?
I get it. I would probably lean on talking to your contacts at Autodesk, and also your system integrators, resellers that you already talk to about Flame on-prem. I think that would really, I see Stefan nodding his head. I think for the much smaller facilities, you need to lean on the experience of the resellers and the system integrator channels, and your relationships with someone at Autodesk, and they'll, between all of them, they'll be able to point you in the right kind of direction for you to get started here. There's still a long way potentially for us to go here in terms of improving this solution. It's not a one-click, but everything's done automatically for you. Cloud is no excuse to not hire IT DevOps engineers. You still need talented engineers and studios that are willing to put this all together, and also build all their proprietary stuff in their pipeline. That stuff doesn't go away overnight. So depending on the kind of facility and the kind of pipeline you're setting up, it may be best to lean on some of that experience in the field.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. So Stefan, do you provide that sort of support?
So we have an FAQ about Flame on the Cloud, which gives you a lot of information about where we start and where we stop. And we decided for the cloud initiative to provide the software, how to deploy on the cloud. But like Mike said, and like I said earlier, working with system integrator, to me, I think is the quickest way to get from A to B without having to learn or master all the cloud, technologies. There's a lot of things, right? And all these technologies are also evolving at the same time. You get CDI, you get all the security, you get all the storage vendors. There's a lot of things that you need to learn. But I would say, working with a system integrator who already deployed Flame family products on the cloud, or even other M&E technologies, will help you in fast quickly discover if the solution is the right one for you, right? You don't want to have to learn all the technologies about something to discover that, well, at the end of the day, that's not something I'm looking for, right? So have a look at our FAQ. So Flame on the Cloud FAQ. Look for this on Google. You'll find the page, and we reference some of our resellers and system integrator who support our products on the cloud. So they will be able to build you a solution tailored to your needs, to your requirements, based on your location, based where you are in the world and which technologies are available. So you're going to get the right experience.
So we have another question here. Will we ever be able to spin up a Flame on Mac in AWS?
Not today.
No, but that's.
But maybe. I'm not going to say no, because I was told in 2018. I said this earlier, didn't I? I was told in 2017, 2018, and Stefan knows this story so well. Flame, it's complicated. You young lads, you don't understand. It will never run in the cloud. IT, and particularly in the cloud, saying never is really quite dangerous. It's a little bit like rag. So it was a good chat.
It's sort of beside the point, whether it's Mac OS or Windows. That's really an issue for the product developers, right? Like Streambox and Flame and others, right? They solve that problem So from a user point of view, why should you care, right? I mean, that's all really transparent. As long as you're getting an output signal that meets your requirements, what does it matter?
If there's a the classic AWS answer is we listen to customer demand and feedback, and that also actually should include partners as well. And so if Autodesk were to come to us and say, we have loads of customers asking us that they would like to run Flame on a Mac in AWS, we would listen to that and we would take that feedback. You can see by the number of EC2 instances that we're building out, if you include every single family and size of EC2 instance that we have these days. I've been quoting the number 500 and I was corrected in December last year because it's actually over 600 now. So it's just ridiculous. That does include lots of different Mac instances of the Mac mini size, but that's not powerful enough to run Flame, and also probably you won't like the cost price point, so you'd prefer to use Linux. It's the known quantity for this workload. We have options for different GPU instances with NVIDIA, different generations of NVIDIA cards in them, which constantly new ones come out. So new, specification of hardware comes out, which Flame will then certify against, and obviously our new version. So it's quite an ecosystem here. There's quite a bit of engagement that's happening behind the scenes here to ensure that the next version of Flame runs smoother, faster, better than the last version when it's running on AWS.
So we have another question here. Does this technology, I assume meaning AWS, also apply to DaVinci Resolve? I think we know the answer to that.
I could probably take this question.
Yeah.
When first we started actually in 2019 to look at virtual encoders on the cloud, and we started with Avid first to, I think it was HPA 2020 when we announced first Avid support. And then we slowly started to add more and more applications. Now we support Adobe as well. We support DaVinci Resolve. And lately we also added Unreal Engine as well. So there is a whole range of applications Streambox can actually support on the cloud in virtual environment. But what I like about Autodesk, it's very good to work with Autodesk because it was easy for us to add, for example, over 412-bit to Autodesk, working with Autodesk team. And also we could add 60 channels of audio very easily, uncompressed audio. So all these features are, different products has different set of features of capabilities on the cloud. But yes, Resolve is supported as well.
Yeah, so the question's not actually specific, but I guess there are two parts to it. One is, does DaVinci Resolve run on AWS? And the answer to that is yes, as well as a number of other, very popular applications that Alex just mentioned. And then the second part of that is, does Streambox technology, the ability to get a reference quality, low latency feed back to the operator, work with it? The answer to that is yes as well. So, and I'm not even a panelist, and I know that.
Yeah, and we also, not only you could run our reference signal on the same instance as, say, Flame, we also provide second workflow when you want to scale your operation. You could actually go and launch Streambox Bridge instance on AWS, and that allows you to encode multiple streams from, say, 4 different Flame stations. So you could scale and reduce your cost as well this way. So there are multiple, you could scale up your workflow to different requirements. And I believe that's workflow that Dave is trying to use as well.
That's exactly correct. That's what I was going to say, is that's the technology we've chosen at Carbon, where all of our Flames are located in the cloud, besides what I mentioned before for ingest. And so we still have this outstanding problem of getting reliable, high quality video out of those workstations. So the Streambox bridge, the CDI bridge, allows us to, stream from multiple, CDI sources. So in this case, we're talking about Flame, but the question earlier about Resolve would also be equally applicable. And that CDI bridge can send out to, however many destinations you need the signal to go to, which sort of makes it super flexible. In an organization like ours, we have direct connects to our on-premise offices, so we can send directly to a Streambox decoder, hardware decoder on premise, we can send to an Apple TV. You know, we can send to the cloud, and then we can pull it down in multiple places. So a client doesn't necessarily have to be right behind the operator, which is an interesting bit of workflow acrobatics you can do with this type of solution too. And I think the bridge really helps with that, because you can send to both places at the same time.
Yeah. And to add, what the difference is in this workflow, that it's going directly over CDI to different instance on the cloud. And for people who are not familiar, CDI is Cloud Digital Interface. And probably Mike could say more about that. But to add to what David said about CDI, it just recently, again, we added support for CDI for all applications that Streambox support. So now you could get CDI out of Adobe Premiere, out of After Effects, out of Unreal Engine, out of Avid, out of DaVinci Resolve. So we provide CDI output from all of those applications now.
Just to cover off, because we've mentioned it a few times, CDI. Essentially it's an SDK, and that icon you've seen in a couple of the diagrams that we've shown today. That SDK is open source. It's available on GitHub /AWS/CDI-SDK. It's a specific SDK to run on AWS that takes advantage of what's known as one of our virtual network interfaces, known as a fabric adapter. Our usual elastic network adapter, ENA, is essentially a virtual NIC, like you'd get anywhere else in another virtualization stack. But the fabric adapter is a kernel bypass, RDMA style fabric adapter. It comes, the EFA fabric adapter actually comes from the high performance compute, the HPC, tightly coupled workload industries, but it also lends itself perfectly to solve a couple of big problems here, which is super low latency interconnect between EC2 instances within what's known as a VPC, so within the virtual networking constructs of a customer's cloud account, not to get too complicated here. It doesn't actually send the signal outside of the cloud. So the CDI is about sending low latency, and this is the second really important thing, super reliable video signal. Essentially, it's a bit like equal cost multipath, ECMP. We're spraying video packets down multiple different paths, maybe duplication, maybe out of order, and that's all being handled by the fabric adapter, which runs on something called the Nitro card. Lots of buzzwords there, but essentially the CDI SDK, and this is the key thing, the point I wanted to make, is it is not for customers. It can be, by the way, it's open source, license free, zero cost. It is designed for ISVs. So it's you know, the Autodesks of this world, shall we say. Sorry to stereotype you there, Stefan. So the application provider, the actual developers need to integrate it. And so like in Flame's case, you have broadcast monitor out and the drop down, you've got CDI, you've got NDI. There's lots of different and then CDI. Obviously our marketing team were absolute geniuses overnight, replacing the S for SDI for C for cloud. You can see why we did that, but we did actually do that on purpose, because CDI really is just like SDI. And that drop down that I'm describing is a great example of how easy it is for customers, end users. That's how you literally configure CDI. And there's a couple of like settings, which I think the defaults are good to go. And that signal is then pumping out of that instance. Whether it goes back to itself to essentially the Streambox local encoder on the same Flame instance, or it goes off to a separate instance, like the workflow that Alex and Dave just talked through, is up to customers. It depends on whether you're scaling out or whether you just want to keep the cost really low and you only want to run one Flame, then run everything in one box. Then you don't have to pay for the second EC2 instance for the encoding. And I love the way that Streambox basically has those two setups, because it solves the two major workflows the way customers want to work. Right. I just wanted to clarify, the CDI is open source, it's free, it's literally just the technology that the vendors need to integrate with, in the same way that Streambox, as essentially the receiver of that CDI signal within the virtual network VPC of the customer's account, they need to integrate with CDI, which they have done. but they've obviously taken it to the next level and provided things like the bridge to then move the signals and change the signals and do interesting things with it. So lots of options for customers here. But CDI is not locked to Streambox. It is literally a construct. It's an SDK, and so other vendors can pick it up and use it. And so what you actually have is an SDI ecosystem that runs on top of AWS. And what we're doing with our SDK is we're making sure it runs as well as it possibly can at the low level within the physicality of our data centers.
So it's sort of a virtual house router.
Yeah, we are, the best way to describe CDI is we are the virtual SDI cable. Instead of the physical SDI cable, you plug it in and everything and stuff like that and checking the signals are flowing. That's all virtualized, and it's just done through an SDK, and the vendor integrates with it in the same way that Stefan's team will integrate with the latest Red camera SDK, ARI camera of different camera manufacturers. They'll just take the latest CDI SDK version every so often in the newer versions of Flame and get new functionality, etc., etc. It's as simple as that. The customer doesn't need to worry about that part. It
just works.
Yeah, it's in the same way an SDI cable plugs in
and
works. Well, unless someone chops it. But yes. You can't virtually chop.
So, and again, anybody wants to jump in on this. So, Mike, you mentioned that 2018, when you guys really started digging into this, how would you characterize where AWS M&E is at this point in time, and what sort of global changes would you expect in a year or two out?
More services, an even bigger landing page with yet more microservices from us. I think that's a pretty safe bet right now, is just we continue to add more services, which may or may not be applicable to media and entertainment. Remember, there's there's a much bigger animal that's being fed here. But the interesting thing is where there's lots of crossover, and I think this project, CDI, is a fantastic example of how we're sitting on the shoulders of CDI, which was built for the broadcast sector, but it's also now being used for the content production arms of media and entertainment. We've taken essentially technology which our HPC, another vertical, the HPC part of our business, built for tightly coupled workloads. We've actually borrowed that technology and built the CDI SDK on top of it to deliver really super reliable video signal, no loss whatsoever, right? For our broadcast, for our live TV channels, part of our Elemental business. And then again, it's mutated, so to speak, again, but it's just been repurposed to deliver essentially the support we need for the content production workloads. And then this builds out this ecosystem for the content production encoders, transporters, back to ground to get those really good signals out for whichever applications need that reference monitor, over the shoulder reference monitor, with the lowest possible latency. So we're solving it within the cloud, but we're leaning on our partners to get that signal, out from the cloud back down to on-prem. We provide native Elemental media services as well, which means essentially that there's other options here, which may or may not be applicable. But there's no lock-in there. Again, we're just agnostic. And so the trend going forward will just be supporting more and more of these workloads. And so hot topics like virtual production and Unreal Engine, seeing what Alex and Bob and the rest of the team have done there to just quickly add support for Unreal, really interesting. I don't know fully where that's going, but it definitely, I can see where that is an emerging space. There may well be other applications that need support added in Streambox as well to enable more workloads to come to the cloud. From our perspective, there's so much more still to be solved. Storage, caching, transfer of data, global workflows, but just it's one step at a time in my office today.
So, and miles to go before I sleep, right? So Bob, you had a question? Bob?
Yeah, I think this has been a great discussion and also hearing of the background history of how we came along, especially with AWS taking the lead and working with Autodesk and other vendors, so forth, right? So I'm sure there are many people on this webinar that would like to know is, a question for Dave is, could you share with us what are the checklist of items that you went through or you're going through now, as you migrate to the cloud? There must be a list of some sort, hardware, the workflows, on-prem workflows, how that's going to translate into from the cloud-based workflows and different technologies that you have to evaluate and assess to build out this platform or build out your workflow solutions.
Yeah, of course. The Carbon has gone through a cloud transformation pretty quickly and pretty heavily over the last, I would say 18 months, where the idea was to get our on-premise facilities up into the cloud as quickly, reliably as possible, replicating the experience of being on-premise. So that all took place, and everybody was up working in the cloud, getting projects out and all that stuff. But there was the odd little, the few bells and whistles, like I mentioned before, that were still missing. Things like video out from the cloud, which was a huge problem that most people who are looking to do these bits of work in the cloud are facing. And this product really solves that problem big time. Really, you need some work to do. You need a place to do it, and those are like the bottom layers of your pyramid, and then that top layer, that how do I route my video? How do I make my computers talk to each other? You're talking about replicating different parts of your on-premise experience. So in the office, we've got video routers that take sources and route the feed to destinations. We've got network switches that interconnect our storage and our workstations. We've got imaging systems that help us deploy operating systems and applications to our client workstations and things like that. In a facility like ours, that's the type of experience and operating experience we look to replicate in the cloud, which we've done here at Carbon, but is the type of thing that may give people a bit of pause when they're looking to get set up in the cloud, if they're more than just maybe 2 or 3 people who need to share assets back and forth. And so yeah, really, for us, really, it's our whole life. We are entirely in the cloud. We do all of our production in the cloud, and so we've got answers for all of those workflow challenges now, thanks to this most recent development in Flame 2023.3 with the CDI out and Streambox's CDI bridge.
So
Cool.
you said that
Thank you.
the cloud is your whole life. I think you need to get out more, Dave.
Oh, trust me.
It might be worth mentioning. It might be worth mentioning that another thing that Stefan and his team did was making sure that Flame can run in some of the managed studio in the cloud. It's kind of a bit of a buzzword, but it's a good way to quickly describe what we're talking about here. So there's ones I know of are things like Arch Platform, Escape Technology, reseller in the UK. They've got their Sherpa platform, but essentially they're running up all of the studio in the cloud, shall we call it. What does that mean? It means the networking, perhaps some storage, the security, the handling everything for you is more of a managed experience. And they also have the ability to run Flame in their environment as well. That might be one of the solutions that some of the resellers and system integrators out there offer up for those users that want to get started running Flame in the cloud. Does Flame run differently in those environments to what we're talking about today? No, they're it's the same product. It's the same application that you buy today. It's just perhaps you might want more of a holding hand and have more of a managed experience. If you need more of you have more of not a beer budget, you have more of a champagne budget, you're wanting something more a la carte, then I'll repeat something I said earlier, which is cloud's not an excuse to not hire really good, talented engineers. You still need to build. We are essentially, the public cloud is like a remote virtualization stack. It just happens to be an incredibly extensive one that's global, has global reach, but you still need to be a builder to build. And sometimes that's where there is a gap of knowledge, or it's technically quite challenging. And that's where these resellers, the SIs, and the managed platforms can lend themselves, perhaps just as a temporary course. You don't need to run just one setup forever when you're in the cloud. That's another beauty thing, which is if Dave perhaps discovers something that's not working, he can try out 10 different ideas and then tear them all down again an hour later. As you invent and innovate and just try different things out.
And so does it come with Amazon Prime?
No, sorry.
Nah. There's a missed opportunity there, I think, right? Get more. So we're sort of running out of actually overtime, and want to thank our panelists for their generosity in spending all this time and sharing all of their knowledge. Does anybody have some concluding remarks they'd like to make? Now would be a good time.
Well, as usual, make sure you can walk before running. So I would say start small. I mean, evaluate the workflow on the cloud to see if it makes sense in your workflow. But yeah, start with one instance and one task, right? So don't start doing 4K long form episodic delivery. To try to do shots, try to do some work to see how the artist will, will migrate from on-premise to cloud. And then after that, you can evaluate what you've done, evaluate the success level of what you've done, and then after plan the next phases to have a studio in the cloud. But yes, start small and then shoot for the moon.
Yeah, and so Mike, you guys have a lot of really great blog posts that are generally informative. So I'd suggest that everybody on this webinar, if you want to know more about it, go to the AWS M&E blog. There's some really good information there.
Yeah, media blog, and just search on Google for Flame, Streambox, CDI. There's a couple of different blog posts that we've done, which actually chronologically have actually shown how Flame is evolving rapidly in the last 18 months as well in the cloud. So watch this space. Yeah.
And I would like to add, just if you want to try, reach out to Streambox, and you could get up and running same day. We have all the software. You could just run on your local machine without need of hardware. Just try it.
Try it before you buy it. Dave, anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, everybody's saying all the same things I was thinking, little bits add up to a lot, and especially in the cloud, you get one Flame working, you can make 10 of them, that afternoon. And, as far as Alex was saying, I got Streambox up in a day in the cloud. I found the CloudFormation template, and 2 hours later I had a license and got the feed into my facility. So, it's
yeah,
totally
you're an
doable.
engineer.
Yeah, but I mean, I think anybody can click that, launch stack button.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. For all the attendees, this has been recorded, and we'll make the video available. And everybody will get an email with a link to it. So thanks, everybody. You guys are awesome. Stefan, stay warm. Mike, how's the weather in London?
It's raining. It tends to do that.
So it's English weather, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Dave, breezy, cold Chicago, how's that doing?
Oh, today it's actually quite nice. It's like 60, but it snowed.
Wow.
It snowed 5 inches on the weekend, so there's that.
Well, I don't want to hear about it. We've got our third snowstorm of the week, and it's only the third day of the week. So, anyhow, so thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for including us.
Yeah.